Folks, morning first of all. Formally, good morning. You're very well welcome to this event at Milton Keynes or MK Dons today, Kick-Off in Business Programme, which I'm going to tell you a little bit more about in a second. My name's Ken Horn. If you've booked through the website, then you'll probably have read the fact that I work pretty much exclusively these days with people like yourself, hopefully, who are thinking about starting a business. If you're not thinking about starting a business, you're probably in the wrong room. So yeah, that's what I've been doing for the best neck end of 5 or 6 years now. I came through the other well-known platforms that you may have heard of, people like Business Link, Enterprise Coaching, Princess Trust. I've done some work for. I've worked for a number of different agencies under contract. I'm not a civil servant. I'm keen to stress that. I have my own agency that I created back in 2005. It's called Mackenzie Horn Limited. Won't mean anything to you at all. We'll talk about business names in the course of today and why that's actually not a very good business name at all. But yeah, so I have my own business that pretty much exclusively these days not only works in enterprise and business startup, but also is a training organisation. So we facilitate events like this and others. We also work in what's known as corporate transition, where we help people that are affected by closure or business contraction. So we do quite a lot of work. But that's very much our area of expertise, is we help people like yourself thinking about starting a business. And in that time, I've helped something in the order of between 5,000 and 6,000 people. So to some extent, the information that I'm going to share with you today is actually put together and constructed by people like yourselves. Because all I've really done is taken, what I've learned over the course of the last sort of 5, 6, 7 years and put it into a sort of bite-sized deliverable form, which is what we have here today. So I'll be surprised, therefore, if a lot of the material that we're going to talk about today doesn't strike chords, because it's extracted from working with lots and lots of people like yourself, and sort of centres on the key challenges and questions and queries that people have typically when they're at that early stage or they're at that pre-start stage. And we'll get a flavour in a moment where everybody is in terms of the process and the training cycle, because part of this initial intro is that I just want to know who you are. Okay, so your name, okay, and also if you have got a business and you're prepared to share it with the people here, great. If you haven't, it's not a prerequisite to be on this event and have to have a full-blown 90-page business plan and already started trading. It's not. In fact, arguably, it would be more beneficial to you if you hadn't actually yet launched. However, I'm respectful of the fact that people have already sort of launched their business, and hopefully there's some material in here today that will also help those people too. Categories of people that we'll have here. We'll have people that are quite far away from perhaps launching next year, so very embryonic, twinkle in your eye, even to the point where not even sure whether this self-employment thing's for me at all. But I'll go along, listen to this geezer bang on, and see whether it's something that I might progress or not. People that have already got a fixed idea, don't care what you say, Ken, that's what I'm doing, right? Whether you like it or not. Respect those people too. People with oodles of ideas, not quite sure which one to select, so I've got about 10 all floating around. And part of the process we'll go through today is to perhaps give you the information and ability then to start to select which businesses might have more chance of flying than others. The other category, of course, is the hot property, the brand new widget. And if you've got a brand new widget, and you don't want to share it with us, I would probably prefer that you didn't anyway, because guess what? I don't need the burden of knowing about your brand new widget. For those people that have got one of those, you'll probably already know that you need a non-disclosure agreement or an NDA to protect that idea to begin with. Happy to answer questions about that at various points during today, because obviously we'll have short breaks this morning and also at lunchtime for half an hour. I'll talk to you about the times in a moment. But during that time, I am available to field any questions that you might have that you don't necessarily want to share with the group collectively, which is understandable, particularly if they're kind of sensitive matters. But it is a very relaxed day. It's about you. It's not about me. It's designed for you to fire as many questions that you have about starting a business as you want or need to, because hopefully, by the end of today, the key objective is you guys go away with the information and also the confidence to go and launch these businesses that you're all thinking about. I'm not Theo Paphitis, I'm not Peter Jones. They're very good at doing that kind of 6 months, 12 months, 18 months and beyond bit. I would kind of hold my own, I think, against any of these individuals when it comes to the earlier bit, the kind of pre-start and also initial 3-6 month period. That's the bit that I tend to specialise in. So I don't get sort of all, muddy about, all the considerations after that point. There's plenty of other support and advice available to you when you get to that stage. I do the kind of initial bit. And part of my job today is to share with you other support platforms that are available to you when you eventually get to that point. Okay, let me tell you about the programme. Kick-off in business. About 2 years ago, a lot of the government agencies were axed, part of the coalition's cull on quangos, one of those being Business Link. Okay, so back then, maybe 2 years ago, 2011 I think it was, nearly 3 years ago this November, when you were thinking about starting a business, the likelihood is you'd have thought, yeah, I'll go and talk to Business Link first and foremost. That was axed. Come on in. You're very welcome. Come and have a seat. So that was axed, and two things happened that day. For me, good advice disappeared because it was pretty good, it's certainly as far as the startup program was concerned. And the second thing that happened for me was that the name was taken down above the door. Back then, if you were thinking about starting a business, you'd have probably gone to Business Link first because it was the universally recognised platform. This universal platform was replaced by a whole kind of sea of providers, a lot of which I could name, but you've probably been there yourself. Any observation as far as online provision is concerned? There's lots of it. All day you could spend. And the big question for me, some of it isn't free. You're absolutely right. Not like this, hey? But that's a very common observation, is the fact that there's so much of this online material. And the big challenge for you guys is, how do you know what you need to know and what you don't need to know? Well, you don't. That's my job. So in the course of today, I'm going to provide you with sufficient information to go and launch businesses. I'm not going to tell you what you need to know in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, and beyond. You will pick that up as you travel. I'm going to provide you with sufficient foundational knowledge. We're talking about finance today. Am I going to make you accountants? No. Am I going to give you, some background foundational information so that next time you have a conversation with somebody from either a bank or financial services of some sort, you'll at least be able to hold your own. That's my job. Okay, so we specialise not only in providing people with the information they need, we also specialise, a bit of a catchphrase of ours, specialise in protecting you from the information you don't need. And there's a responsibility, I think, on people like me, because unfortunately this is where the revenue let themselves down. They just sort of they kind of flood you with this information. And my fear is, if people do that too much, two things. We referred to this earlier on. Either you implode because there's so much information, and really concerningly would be the fact that you are dissuaded from starting at all. Now that's the crime of the century for me, because I've met people that have come away and thought, oh, there's so much to think about, I'm just going to go and get a job again, right? Or whatever else they're going to do. So that's a real problem for me. Therefore, we try and tailor what we do to provide people with that foundational knowledge, okay? So we launched back in April 2012, given this vacuum that was created as a result of no Business Link anymore. We launched what's known as Kick-Off in Business, okay? I was given a small amount of money from the Skills Funding Agency. Anybody here from the Skills Funding Agency? Good. Right, no, actually, that's not particularly a bad thing. So They gave me a small amount of money. They said, look, you're really good at talking, Ken, but go and prove yourself, right? So off I went. I was given 3 months to spend quite a lot of cash. And I'd done a couple of little jobs with football clubs, and I thought, I'm going to have to hit the ground hard, fast, and aggressively, and make lots of noise about it. One thing football clubs are quite good at are all of those things. Did one at Derby, did one at Stoke, and to my amazement and surprise and delight, lots of people turned up. And we were able to prove then, through that small pilot, that we had something that worked. Soon after that, Football League knocked on the door, said, like the look of what you're doing here. We're in that space. We do a lot of community work. How would you like to do them all over the country? So without their initial help, we wouldn't have grown to the extent we've grown. So had we not done the kind of pilot to begin with, and there's a sort of message there, had we not done that, we wouldn't have got noticed by the Football League Trust. They then acted as the link between us and Newcastle, Portsmouth, Norwich, Bristol, all over the country. So that's what we now do. We run a programme of events like this one all over the country, from Newcastle to Portsmouth, Norwich to Bristol, helping people like yourself start up in business. And our funding comes from the Skills Funding Agency. Now, for us to get funding, we must run courses, not events. And for us to run courses, we have to bury, if not embed, a qualification in today's proceedings. That's what changed. We used to have a qualification that was over 2 days. The awarding body, a bit like EdXL for you guys, okay? But ours is called SFEDI. Anybody heard of SFEDI? No? Okay. So they're a bit like EdXL, but in the enterprise game, all right? And they brought out a one-day qual. So we embed, if you like, or bury that qualification in this day, okay? So guess what? Bad news, there's a little bit of paperwork, okay? So what you're doing, you're effectively enrolling and disenrolling in the space of the one day. Are you going to become part of some government agenda or on the HMRC radar? No, you're not. In fact, nothing's going to happen to that data once you actually leave here today. All it's saying is you came along, you attended the course, you completed it by 3:30, 4 o'clock, and you're just agreeing to that. And by doing that, we are able to attract funding for each and every one of you. And that's how this program works, that's how we're able to sustain it, is that we get a value for whoever you are, whether you're employed, unemployed, whether you are 19, whether you're 45, whatever profile you are, we get a different level of funding. For some people, we get very little. For some people, we get a bit more. But the mix works, and that's how we got this whole thing off the ground. Okay? No surprise to learn that, guess what? We are a little bit sort of attractive and magnetic to some commercial operators too, aren't we? Because we're helping lots of people like you who need bank accounts, who need insurance. But I'm very quick to stress, we're not here to sell at you. In fact, they're not here today, whereas on some of the events they come along and just tell you a little bit more about the service that they provide. But I'm very, very nervous about that relationship because I, like you know, have attended these events and the thought of being sold out really is a turn-off. So we're very careful not to allow that to happen. So nobody's here to sort of like force any of those products on you. All that I will say to you is that I'm in this space. This is what I do. If I tell you that they have a good product, that needs to stand up. Because the minute you start to question that, the whole thing falls apart. Okay, so I have to make absolutely sure that whoever I'm talking about up here, you know, actually walk the walk as well as talk the talk, as far as people like yourself are concerned. Because the minute you start to question that, then our whole integrity starts to break up. Okay, so that's how it's all put together. That's how it's funded for those people that were curious. And as a result, of course, we're able to offer it out free to people, because my guess is that if you were asked to pay for it, you'd probably take your chances online. And now, knowing what we know about the online provision, that's very worrying for me. Okay, so today, we've mentioned it is a formal qualification. It's actually a level 1 for everybody that's got a degree and everything, right? Okay, so it's a level 1 qualification. But some people, hey, it's a nice byproduct of today's proceedings. Hopefully it's a bit of fun. You know, business, HMRC is pretty heavy stuff, right? So we try and keep it light. It's quite an exciting thing to do, start a business. So, it's important that people enjoy that process. We split today's content into sort of 4 parts. Get a flavour in a moment for where you're at in this process, but we kind of deal with it in 4 bits. First bit is all to do with pre-start stuff, so preparation. For those people that haven't yet started, what are some of the considerations before I start? Now, anybody that has already started, don't turn off at this point, because I can pretty much guarantee that there'll be some information in here that even those people that have just started or even have been trading for some time won't actually have considered nor may know about the sort of pre-start process. So that's important. We're going to talk about nitty-gritty, okay, so the formality of setting a business up, all that stuff, Shall I be a limited company? Shall I be a sole trader? What type of insurance do I need? Who do I need to tell as far as working from home is concerned? All the kind of nitty-gritty stuff, right? So apologies in some respects, but I know people are kind of, curious about all that and want to do the right thing, understandably, and quite right too, and therefore important that we cover some of those topics. We're going to talk about finance. Not only where do we get it, how do we get it, do we need it at all, and some of the myth and mystery that surrounds the whole sort of subject to finance. Apologies to any accountants or financially literate people in the room, but I'm afraid 95% of the people that I work with, it's new to those people, and therefore, part of my job today, as I mentioned earlier on, is to just give you some sort of foundational knowledge as to how some of the terms work and some of the devices people use to measure the financial performance of any business. Things like P&L, things like balance sheets. What are they all about and what do they do? So hopefully we can provide you with a kind of foundational understanding of all that. And no apologies for rounding today off on the whole subject of what's my proposition, what's my menu, who's my market for that menu, and how am I going to importantly communicate one to the other. That's a business. That's what businesses do well. Every business you look at out there in the big wide world, get that bit right. What's my offer? What's my proposition? Who am I targeting with that proposition? And how am I going to communicate without spending 250 grand on X Factor, because I haven't got 250 grand. So how am I going to communicate one to the other inexpensively but effectively? And that's what we do well here. That's my background too, is guess what? Most of the people that I work with don't have oodles of cash. In fact, very little money at all. So how do we get the message out there? How do we broadcast this thing without spending oodles of cash? And I'm keen to stress the reason why that's at the end and not at the beginning, because if I do that at the beginning, then I'll talk about all the nitty-gritty. You'll go away worried about being a sole trader or a limited company. It's really not important. In fact, it's academic. What you surround yourself as or frame yourself as in terms of sole trader, social enterprise, or whatever it happens to be, do you know what? It doesn't really affect whether in fact you've got a good proposition, whether in fact you've got good, or you're clear about who you're targeting with that proposition and how important you're going to communicate one to the other. That's a business. Let's not lose sight of that. And unfortunately, once again, the revenue tend to do much more, because guess what? That's their job, right? They do much more of that stuff than perhaps telling people how to develop trade, because last time I looked, you can't tax fresh air, right? So we need trade, all right? So we're not going to apologise for that. We're going to spend a big chunk of today, hopefully, if we can get through the other stuff, talking about those important building blocks of any business. Talk to you about what happens after this. One of the challenges for us is, because of the nature of the way that we're funded, it's pretty difficult for us to provide you with any ongoing support. Apologies actually for that, but it is a problem for us. It's something we're trying to deal with. It's one of the reasons why these guys are involved, because they've got a product called Startup Loans. Anybody come across Startup Loans? Yeah. It's good, but you need to have a loan, right? And some of you won't need a loan, and some of you, I'm going to say to you, don't get a loan, because it's a financial commitment. But nevertheless, the great thing about that scheme, and by the way, they're not the only provider of it. There's lots of different providers out there of the startup program. We just happen to have an association with these guys for fairly obvious reasons. The great thing about the startup loan program is that if you take out £1,000 loan, which is relatively modest, they'll give you up to about £850 worth of support, okay, from somebody like either me or another kind of coachy, mentory type person. And that's why I would recommend you consider that area, because in today's environment, field-based support, as we've discussed earlier on, is pretty rare. And therefore, I'm always looking, as you are, for ways in which we can provide that support without you having to put your hands in your pocket too heavily. Okay, so that all comes with that. We've got one or two little sort of nuggets online. One of them is called Scavenger. We're going to talk a lot of general stuff today because it's going to be difficult to get into everybody's specific business, isn't it? But Scavenger is one of those things that is specific to your business. You can go in there free of charge and get a 4-page printout of your specific business considerations. So where do you need to go? What type of framework would you normally choose for a catering business or a cleaning business or whatever it happens to be? That is very much case specific. So whatever type of business, there's a team of people sit up in the Northeast researching every new business that comes out. So it's a pretty useful tool. We're going to run some of the courses too. That's our website, and of course you've got the Virgin Startup platform as well, should you choose to go down that route.